Good morning, Europe. It's Tuesday, the 19th of June. Our top stories for you. Hanging by a thread, Angela Merkel's political future in the balance over the migrant crisis as her coalition partners issue a deadline. Where next? That's the question hundreds of migrants who arrived in Spain after days at sea are now asking as they face a divided EU. And over in the Cube, our social media news desk.
A continent divided. We will bring you all voices from all sides on this issue here in the Cube.
Never-ending war. Ceasefire hopes in the air in Yemen. Millions of people now facing starvation as fighting endangers a vital port. And Cristiano Ronaldo's infamous bust gets a facelift. Thank you for starting your morning with us. Our top story, Angela Merkel has been given a last-minute 2-week extension to save her government amid a tense standoff over migration. After a years-long open-door immigration policy, the Chancellor is facing fierce opposition from her Interior Minister, who is calling for the country's borders to be closed to migrants who have an open asylum application in another EU member state. Horst Seehofer now says he'll wait until after the summit to broach the topic again. Well, despite its own raging argument over migration, the U.S. waded into the European debate yesterday with this tweet from President Donald Trump. He said the people of Germany are turning against their leadership as migration is rocking the already tenuous Berlin coalition. He said that crime in Germany is way up, calling it a big mistake made all over Europe in allowing millions of people in who have so strongly and violently changed their culture, end quote. Well, with the approach of summer and an expected increase in the number of migrants attempting to cross into Europe, the issue of migration has created rifts between the continent's leaders. Merkel has entered into talks with Italy's new prime minister, and today she will be speaking to the French president to try to smooth things over ahead of the EU summit. Speaking yesterday, she reiterated Germany's commitment to a European solution, saying that it's in the German interest to achieve the orderly conduct of migration together with European partners. And she said that blocking borders without achieving an agreement could lead to a negative domino effect. Well, for more on this, our correspondent Jessica Saltz is joining us now live from Berlin. Jessica, 2 weeks. She has 2 weeks to try to solve this problem. Has the crisis been averted, really?
Well, it's really felt here that this 2 weeks is a real reprieve. And of course, the 2 weeks is already starting to tick down. So a lot of pressure on Angela Merkel to really come up with a European response to the migration crisis that will be convincing. 62% of Germans, according to recent polls, want to see tighter controls of migration. So this adds pressure to Angela Merkel. And of course, there's a brash, if factually incorrect, tweet by Donald Trump, also stirring up the migration debate here in Germany. There is certainly a mood amongst EU leaders that there does need to be greater control when it comes to migration, such as protecting the external borders and a more streamlined and controlled migration process into Europe. So this is something that can be discussed ahead of and in this summit in 2 weeks' time. But whether Angela Merkel will make enough progress on this, enable to convince her detractors at home, who are growing in number, of course, remains to be seen.
Yeah, and Angela Merkel, she's meeting French President Emmanuel Macron today. Can we really expect anything to come out of this or anything to be resolved?
Well, I think migration is really going to overshadow these talks between Emmanuel Macron and Angela Merkel today. Merkel really needs Macron on side. It's very important then that Berlin and Paris go to this summit in 2 weeks' time, side by side, on the issue of migration. And I expect that we will hear Emmanuel Macron reiterating his support for Angela Merkel on the issue. Whether there will be enough time left for Macron to get round to what he wants to discuss, which is his plans for far-reaching EU reforms, remains to be seen. Angela Merkel has made tentative steps to tentatively agreeing to some of his ideas, but they remain controversial in Germany. And with enough domestic discord here on the migration issue, I don't think Angela Merkel's going to want to be discussing any issues which remain controversial in Germany.
All right, thank you for that, Jessica Saltz, live there in Berlin. Well, as Jessica mentioned, migration is sure to be a hot topic at the talks today. The latest figures for the number of asylum seekers in the EU have just been released. And for more on this, journalist Stefan de Vries joins us now live from Paris. Stefan, can the EU really make the migration changes that it wants, considering the laws in place in the EU?
Well, it will be very difficult. Actually, the European Union has been struggling to regulate the asylum procedure on the continent for almost 2 decades. The current regulation is called Dublin III, which is a technical name for something actually quite simple. It means that a refugee who arrives in Europe has to apply for asylum in the country where he arrives. So he cannot choose the country of his destination. He has to stay in the first country of arrival until his asylum procedure has been treated. Now, of course, within Europe, it's very easy to travel since there are theoretically no border checks anymore. So a lot of people arrive in the south of Europe, Italy and Greece, and then they get to the north and they stay there. Now, this country of their second destination, so let's say the Netherlands, Germany, Scandinavia, actually, they have to send them back to Italy or Greece. Now, this is where the problem arises because, of course, Italy and Greece are closest to the countries where most of the refugees come from, so they are disproportionately touched by the system. Everybody agrees that this is no longer working, that there is a complete makeover necessary for this system, but the question is how? Because there's so many different opinions on this crisis that it's very hard to find an agreement, and I don't see it coming next week either on the European summit. And there's also a paradox, as you just mentioned. The European Asylum Office in Malta yesterday released new statistics about the number of migrants arriving, and actually the numbers are falling sharply, 44% less than next year, than previous year. So we're talking a lot about it, but in reality, the numbers of refugees arriving is declining sharply.
All right, thank you for that. Stefan de Vries joining us live there from Paris. Now, migration really is a big issue that's dividing Europe across the continent. And Alex in the Cube is keeping track of all the voices on this issue. Alex.
We are, Tessa. Here in the Cube, we listen to all voices from all sides. Our team monitoring everything that is going on across the continent to pull out some of the key voices in this discussion. And we're hearing there how this is a European problem, but at the moment it might be a shared problem, but there doesn't seem to be a shared solution. And this is really exposing tensions in Germany. We're hearing from Jessica at the top of the programme about the tensions in Angela Merkel's coalition. Well, Bild's newspaper is saying, yes, she's got these 2 more weeks, but we would expect this power struggle between Angela Merkel and her coalition partners to be extended, to expand over the coming weeks. There's a suggestion here that this is Angela Merkel is effectively on notice in Germany. Andy Eckhart, NBC correspondent in Germany as well, picking up this transition between Angela Merkel buying time for herself and her coalition, and then all of a sudden, Donald Trump shooting her yesterday on Twitter, firing shots at Germany's policy, saying that the claims that crime in Germany is way up and that Germans are turning against their leadership. So that's not going to help things in the German situation. But Julia Hartley-Brewer, a commentator in the UK, picked up Donald Trump's remarks. And I think her suggestion here reflects quite a lot of European views on this. She's saying, hey, Donald Trump, we don't want what's happening to us in terms of migration in Europe either. So there is support, not just criticism, for Donald Trump. A whole array of voices. I just want to bring up this, though. There is the human side that is in the press today in the newspapers. This from Las Provincias, the newspaper in Valencia, where these migrants landed, where the Aquarius docked. Basically showing the human face, saying that this is a refuge city. All voices, many difficult points of view on this. We'll bring you all of that in the Cube.
All right, thank you for that, Alex, and the Cube team. Now, the new Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez will head to Paris this Saturday to discuss the migration crisis with Emmanuel Macron, just as almost half of the 630 migrants freshly disembarked from Aquarius in Valencia told authorities they want to seek asylum in France. I'm joined now by correspondent Annelise Borges. Annelise, good to see you there. You just got back from Valencia. Can you tell us what were your impressions and how was the city welcoming these migrants?
Well, Tessa, one of the most touching things about Sunday was actually to witness the hundreds of volunteers who registered and showed up to help with the reception of the 630 people who arrived in Valencia on Sunday. And also, actually, before we docked, there were several boats, private sailing boats that approached Aquarius with welcome signs. Of course, that touched a lot of the people on board Aquarius, who exchanged the very few Spanish words that they actually had. They said, hola, gracias, ¿qué tal? So it was a heartwarming moment. I would say that globally, the city of Valencia is supportive of the decision of taking in these people. And I got to meet and spend time with the man behind that decision, the mayor of Valencia, to ask him just what this all means for his city and its people. Take a listen.
It symbolizes a lot. First, that for us the priority is people and human rights. And then there are the numbers, the economy, etc. We saw that these people were at a real risk of suffering a humanitarian catastrophe. And we thought the priority was this, and that we would then look at how to go about it. And I think it went well. It went very well. We thought we would propose some changes. We would even demand changes in migration policy. It seemed important to us. Valencia wants to be a haven, like Barcelona, Madrid, and many Spanish cities want to be. And it's had the opportunity to be one. We are happy, satisfied, and excited.
So that's a picture in Spain. Here in France, the situation is slightly different. According to a recent poll, 56% of French people have said that they support the decision of not letting Aquarius dock in France. There was, of course, a moment where Corsica offered its ports to Aquarius. That option was ruled out, and the majority of the French people then believed that that was the right thing to do. So it will be interesting to see how this all plays out in the next few weeks and months. This is going to be a lengthy process for those 630 migrants. And this debate over immigration, a very sensitive topic, a very divisive debate, is far from over, Tesa.
Indeed, a difficult subject all throughout. Thank you for that, Annelies Borges, live there in Paris. A deal may be close to end fighting for Yemen's main port to ease what's been dubbed the world's most urgent humanitarian crisis. The UN Special Envoy has extended his stay in the hope of securing an agreement. Tukumbo Salako has this story.
The push for peace in Yemen received a boost last night. The United Nations Special Envoy told a closed-door Security Council meeting, the third in the last week, that all sides are committed to relaunching peace talks. But for now, the Arab coalition is continuing to bomb Houthi fighters holed up at Hodeidah airport. The Saudi-led alliance says it won't back down until the Iranian-backed rebels withdraw unconditionally, a demand unlikely to be accepted since it would offer them no guarantees on Yemen's future. The Houthi rebels are dug in to protect critical supply lines from the Red Sea. Dozens of civilians have been caught in the crossfire, and UN officials fear a prolonged fight will worsen an already critical situation.
I emphasize my grave worry regarding the Saudi and Emirati-led coalition's ongoing attacks in Hodeidah, which could result in enormous civilian casualties and have a disastrous impact on life-saving humanitarian aid to millions of people, which comes through the port.
Arab coalition leaders say 100 trucks of food aid are now headed to the city. An escape route has also been established to allow the estimated 2,000 to 3,000 Houthi rebels to withdraw and minimize the suffering for civilians. Tukumbo Salako, Euronews.
And still to come for you on Good Morning Europe, the Trump administration on defense fighting growing pressure to change a policy that separates migrant children from their parents. Also ahead, the fierce competition to own a hat Napoleon may have worn at the Battle of Waterloo. But first, a look at your weather. You're watching Good Morning Europe. Our top story. After being given a 2-week deadline to fix the migrant crisis in Germany, Angela Merkel is heading to meet Emmanuel Macron to work out a solution at the European level. The German Chancellor managed to hold off members of her ruling coalition in a crisis which threatens to split the government. Well, as the immigration debate rages on here in Europe, in the United States, the Trump administration is facing massive pressure to change a policy that has illegal immigrant children separated from their parents. Euronews journalist Bel Donati has the story.
These are the images of children filmed at the US southern border that have sparked global outrage. Thousands of migrant children being separated from their parents. And now, in newly released audio, you can hear their desperation. The audio comes from a civil rights lawyer given to her by a client. It's not verified by Euronews, But in it, you can hear 6-year-old Alison Jimena Valencia Madrid from El Salvador begging to talk to her aunt. These separations are the result of a Trump administration policy announced in April. Zero tolerance for anyone caught crossing the border illegally. Parents facing prosecution are taken into federal custody to adult detention centres, but their children go to different facilities. The administration is now on the defensive.
The United States will not be a migrant camp, and it will not be a refugee holding facility.
The Secretary of Homeland Security says they're just doing their job.
We are enforcing the laws passed by Congress. We have to do our job. We will not apologize for doing our job.
Bel Donati reporting there. Now, the U.S. administration has been heavily criticized for this zero-tolerance policy, but that didn't stop the U.S. president from issuing his own criticism at Germany's open immigration policy. Alex in the Cube has this story.
Tesa, it's an issue that is dividing people on both sides of the Atlantic, and Donald Trump wading into the European discussion. But perhaps the image we are seeing of the US problem, we saw a lot of these images in Bel's report there, but this one in particular grabbed public attention. It's a little girl crying as her mother is searched. She had come in through Mexico. This is at the border in Texas, is where where they were stopped in Texas, crying here. Now, this image has been widely shared. We know it was taken by John Moore of Getty Images, and some of the facts that they're reporting is that this family travelled roughly 2,500 kilometres to reach the United States. And as you can see here, desperation on the little child's face. Now, this has been widely shared, and it's perhaps become the human face of this problem. So with these problems in the United States, Donald Trump took aim at Europe, some might say, to deflect criticism and point out the situation here as justification. He tweeted that the people of Germany are turning against their leadership. He said that crime is way up in Germany because of migration. The suggestion from the president here seems to be that without rigid border controls, the types of which he is supporting, the alternative is the situation in Europe, which in his characterization here is one of crime and disorder and crisis. Now, that has been fact-checked by media over here, including the DW publication in Germany, the news source in Germany, who quote a government report in Germany from last month, which shows that crime last year in Germany fell by 5% to its lowest in 30 years. That is despite the arrival of more than 1 million migrants since 2015. So just want to finally leave you on this thought here, which is a tweet from a German saying nothing is going to rally German support in favour of Angela Merkel than a tweet from Donald Trump. So a divisive issue on both sides of the Atlantic, but perhaps Donald Trump's tweet over here might have actually helped Angela Merkel. A lot of views on this. What do you think? Let us know using #TheCube.
All right. Thank you for that, Alex and the Cube team. Now, an epileptic boy in the UK who was admitted to hospital after being denied access to medical cannabis oil has been discharged. 12-year-old Billy Caldwell, whose epilepsy allegedly improved with the substance, sparked a political debate for a review on existing law on medical cannabis. The UK government announced it is putting together a panel of experts to analyse the legalisation of medical cannabis for future cases. Now, England fans in Russia were celebrating the traditional way last night after their team beat Tunisia 2-1. Jubilation was in the air in this English pub in the Russian city of Volgograd after Harry Kane scored the 2 goals. In Sochi, Panama fans were all smiles as their national team made their first World Cup entrance ever, but they lost 3-0 to Belgium. And still to come for you, the Cube reveals what happened to an infamous bust of Portuguese footballer Ronaldo, Cristiano Ronaldo, that is. But first, your weather. You're watching Good Morning Europe. Welcome back. Now, a hat is said to have been worn by Napoleon Bonaparte has sold at auction right here in Lyon. The iconic tricorn, which historians say may have been dropped during the battle at Waterloo, sold for 350,000 euros, including fees. And that's far beyond the pre-sale estimate. Now, remember that bronze bust of Cristiano Ronaldo? That gave everyone a good laugh. But apparently there's some development there. Alex in the Cube has more on this.
In case you missed it, Tessa, we were all talking about the bust of Ronaldo unveiled last year. Which bust? Let me just jog your memory. That bust, that one there, which people immediately pointed out didn't look all that much like Cristiano Ronaldo, but it quite quickly gained a cult following online. People had a good laugh about it, but actually it became quite popular. Well, discreetly last week it was swapped for this. A new bust of Cristiano Ronaldo. This was swapped ahead of the game with Spain, in which Ronaldo scored a hat-trick, of course. This discreet switch came at the request of Ronaldo's family. But not everybody's happy with the change. Some people are saying, what happened to the old one? We want it back. Vaughan Fry here saying, honestly, this new one's not much better. You might as well have stayed with the old one, which people were talking about. There's now a petition to restore the old one. So maybe, Tessa, the lesson in all this is if you've done it and people like it, even if it's not perfect, stick with it. What do you think? Let us know using hashtag #TheCube.
I don't know which one I prefer, actually. I'll have a second look. Thank you for that, Alex. And thank you for joining us on Good Morning Europe. Do stay with Euronews for more on your top stories. In the meantime, we'll leave you with today's no comment from Russia, where England fans are daring to dream of World Cup glory after beating Tunisia in their first game.